This is Gretchen Pruitt. I'm interviewing Rick Schnitzler on November 7th at the Hagley Library. So yeah, if you'd like to tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I want to make right off the bat to confirm that you mentioned about my collecting career. I was a dealer, an entrepreneur, which to me translated where I would go out and find stuff, primary and unfound stuff, whether it was cars, literature, whatever, and find out where it belonged, who needed it, who should have it. In other words, these objects, no matter how humble or how rare and special, where would they enhance either some personal energies or fulfill gaps in formal knowledge? So that's quite different than collecting. And that was the relationship. That fundamental difference is what propelled the relationship, the productive relationship that I had with Taylor. Because he wanted it, and I would go find it. And he used to hang around, and we used to do work together because he had money, and he would get first refusal on many really which would help my cash flow immensely. And he would be happy, I would be happy, and that was the really fundamental driver in our relationship.
Well, that's great, and I thank you so much for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I think that'll actually make this really interesting because a couple of the other guys we're talking to are collectors, so this is going to give us a really diverse perspective. So I guess I'll change my question around a little bit.
Okay, and it gets worse.
Oh no. Well,
yeah.
Can you tell? I'll just change the question a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're a dealer then, and how did you first get interested in doing that? How did you start?
Well, it goes, and I do have some images here, some that I brought along just to illustrate points if appropriate, and we can certainly enable, Hagley to have access to them for whatever purposes. But my interest in obsolete cars, as opposed to antique and classic, was just too old. It goes back to when I was a child, and my parents took me to a car show in Brookline, Mass. in 1950. And I got to sit at that point you could sit in the cars and stuff. And that was apparently a very positive emotional experience. And it was just like other kids get to play basketball and be coached by their dads or whatever. I got to sit in the struts and be applauded. And I've got the evidence with me. That's the earliest, the earliest childhood memories. But when I was 16, I had this great urge to buy a vintage car and restore it. Again, it was a direct stream from that. And this was living in Brookline, Mass, and a high school kid. And I put an ad in the Boston Globe needing an antique car, one antique car, $300 or less. And the only convertible that was offered was, here's the Flint connection, a 1932 Buick Series 50 Sport Phaeton, which was one of 101 that were built in Flint. And so I then, worked to restore that car. And so that, again, way down deep in the hard wiring is the value of, that these things have more value than just ain't that cute, And so I restored it, and again, it was a product of, was built in Flint, and I then entered Rhode Island School of Design in the architecture program, and in 1963, I had restored the car to the point where we drove it to Detroit to bring one of our classmates home, and during that visit, we went to Flint, and so forth. So there's these, really basic, hey, look, this thing enabled me to live. Oh, gee, that's, But the history, the real lesson there is the value of the associations of the object. It isn't that it's worth $17,650 at auction, but any car accrues a huge value in its history of who's had it and where it's been and so forth. And so when I would find them or buy them, it wasn't what it was worth, but how do you find where it goes, where it should be, and the value, the cash will precipitate out as a byproduct of the real deal, which is about conserving America's transportation heritage, family associations, and other key social values.
Well, and that's, I want to come back to the value part because I think that is a really interesting facet of this. But, so it sounds like your early interest started with the actual car, which I think seems pretty common. How did you transition to start, how did you become a dealer? How did that?
Okay. Well, again, it's like, where's the order here? Who knows what the order is? So I got the 32 Buick, okay, this number 5 condition car that needed everything. And an uncle and an aunt moved into a new house that was actually a very old house. And I went up in the attic, and there was a pile of automobile sales brochures. And what do you think was in them? The sales brochure for my Buick. And that's, it's like, okay, well, I need this one. And I know from that experience of, aside from delight, it was documentation about what, with factory specs and so forth. And what the factory had to say about it and the marketing people had to say about it when it was new. So that, to create the market perceptions. But anyway, I was stuck with what do I do with this? And this was 1960 now, okay? And there were car shows, and apparently I took this pile of brochures to a car show, and sold them. 17, money, but part of it is the money, but it was so much, as opposed to so much more than that. Again, the value is that these things are documents and that they have that they can enable proper restoration, which enables conservation of the memories of the car, the associations of the car.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that? You said that the catalogs can actually help you with your restoration?
Yeah.
Could you tell me more about that?
Okay. Anyway, the other thing I learned was that I'm pretty good at selling stuff. I never had any experience. But, interacting with people who, come up and say, I've got a 41 Cadillac, what do you have on it? Well, nothing, but I'll see if I can, and then I'd go buy other piles of stuff. And the value, it's documentation. It's really like a 52 Buick brochure. That's the deed of what the car is, issued by the factory. So that it's the ultimate statement. If it has, if it shows a dashboard with green surrounds on the instrument panels, on the instruments or something, that's what you do. And it's even different than if, like one of the issues now, only half a century hence, is that you got all this, electronic, imagery. So it's no problem to go and copy a 52 Buick and post the images on the internet. Just go do it. You'll see they're there. But holding the paper, seeing the ink, feeling the texture, the smell, it's like having a copy of the Declaration of Independence, on the internet or the real thing. So there's, it's like it's irrefutable. This is what they said. It is. And that's what my huge numbers of customers would want. They want to know what's the correct definition of, you know, what's the correct taillight for this particular car or whatever, just like I needed to know. And the Buick, I restored it and to the standards of the day, and it was, and with the huge delight is finding someone else with the same car. You drive down the, somewhere or other. If you have a 32 Buick and it needs restoration, and you find another one, again, we're talking decades ago, but you have an instant rapport with that person. You have this very deep set of emotions about conserving and enjoying this object. And how did you get one? Why do you have one? This kind of stuff. This, it's the associations. And it's very unusual to find someone, you go to a car show, you got a 58 Buick or a 71 Dodge or something. There's reasons why they have those cars. And it's almost never, oh, I love the configuration of the metal, or the, this one's got the right motor in it, or something like that. It's almost always, my dad had one, so forth. So there's a huge intergenerational set of links. And again, what we were talking about before the camera went on about, Southeast Michigan and the generational connections, which are so much related, unrealized by your generation, but there's so much power in what people used to do there, and to transfer it to your generation. You guys are all ready to start again, thanks. And again, I got some firsthand experience over there with, real live, powerhouse and even dumb kids. But it's like it's built into the place. And it isn't if it's a Buick or a Cadillac or it's just we're ready to go. It's really the cultural heritage.
I think that's one of the points you just made are really important. And I really want to get back to how you said people were using the Cadillacs. Mm-hmm. Before we get there, just to round out this section, I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little about, you said that you found these Cadillacs in your aunt and uncle's attic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's really what got you started. But this seems like this has been, really formative and really something you've spent a lot of time on in your life with these Cadillacs. And I'm really interested in how, you went to the initial car show, but how did it go from there? How did you get, what was the next step as from a 17-year-old, to an adult?
Well, you got to provide the context, which was what I was told to do with my life by my parents, and which I had a great affinity for, which was to become an architect. And during the time when I was 10 or something until I actually entered Rhode Island School of Design, I spent a lot of time designing and drawing buildings and making models of buildings. I just needed to do it. It wasn't optional. So I wasn't paying attention to cars at all during the junior high and high school years. And I can't really tell you what propelled me to need that Buick or to need a car. And it wasn't that I had any inclination of what was going to happen a month after I bought it. But it was just a need. It was a basic need. I think part of it was related to hand skills. Part of it was I actually did want a car to drive around in. But why would any kid buy a car that was so far off center and unlike anything that anybody else had? I can't answer that, but I needed to do it. And then to drive it to Detroit, 2,200 miles and back. It's my first time in Detroit, I was like, and So I can't really answer that. In terms of the values of the brochures, there is a profound chop between people who deal in certain segments of the antique and collectible field and those that collect it. It's different brain chemistry. It really is different brain chemistry. And people who deal, either it can't be just strictly a, what's the cash margin here. It's got to be a need to understand. But here's the big one. They don't need to keep it. They don't, collecting, major league collecting, such as Taylor, you could ask a psychologist, and maybe you should, but what makes him need to have 75 crates of auto sales literature to keep it? It's one thing to understand what it is, each piece, but it's something, what do you need to keep it for? But, so is it, I don't want to accuse him or even suggest that he is a hoarder, but there's some parallel there in terms of why, and I never ever understood, what do you need all this stuff for? Okay, you find out that it's the American Austin from 1931, has different headlight lenses, but then, how long do once you ascertain that, and once you put the information in a safe format, in a safe place that it's accessible, excuse me, So I never, ever have understood, not that I haven't had a good time and fulfilled a lot of needs, like with Taylor and other collectors, but ain't my game, never was. It was place the stuff where it can be safe and useful, because it wasn't my job to keep the stuff. Taylor wants to act as a warehousing agent, that's fine. And once anything went to him, I never said, well, where is the 46 Ford Sportsman color folder, the edition number 2? Because I knew where it was.
Thank you. So, how did you go about finding collectors to sell your catalogs?
Oh, you're asking me for the trade secrets, the sourcing. Okay. I don't want to be tacky, but I go to these car shows and they have a flea market, and they put out a big sign that said "Literature Wanted," and that was a key device. And I think, did you interview Fred Simeone?
Not yet.
Okay, Fred has one of my signs. It says "Literature Wanted." When he opened up his museum, I gave it to him. Yeah.
So when you go to a show,
yeah.
You wouldn't come there with catalogs. You would.
No, I set up a table with archive boxes with A to Z. I've got pictures of them, but and it was sales literature, paint chip charts, so you get your color right, tune-up charts, magazine articles, and all these different categories that a car owner would need, owner's manuals. And I would make my money when the guy with the 52 Buick would come up, and he didn't just buy the sales brochure, he bought 4 magazine ads, and and I had a better array of that kind of, of stuff than different categories than anybody else who was selling it. Taylor didn't need all those different categories. He wanted this one. If you really got I'm trying to think of the right word, annoyed. That's it. He would buy factory photos, which are the 8x10 glossies issued by the public relations departments of the. But it was sales brochures. It was only the best, the deluxe ones, editions that he needed. So he was a different kind of a customer than a guy with restoring a car. And most of my business was with people who were restoring cars. And again, I'd find out what they needed, and then I'd go and find it. And you asked about how I found the stuff, and one source, it was from other collectors. People just, collecting it's an exercise where you have stuff more than you need. The other came from people who would visit the car shows. And they weren't connected with the hobby as such, but they would have grandfather's thing, or they went to the Chicago show, and 24 years ago, this box of stuff sitting in the basement or in the attic, what to do with it. But it was all, I shouldn't say all, 90% of what I sold had never been into the marketplace. And the very best, the rarest connoisseur grade stuff, there's two guys who would get almost all of it, Taylor and Fred Simeo. That's why Taylor would just hang around. I mean, he's like, he was he was very subtle in his, well-mannered and all that, but he also was aggressive in his own way. In that, the best example of that is the Carlisle show and flea market, which started up in the mid to late 1970s. I don't know whatever probably 75. And he shared my booth with me because he always had duplicates to sell. But A, he didn't need the money, and B, he was really just wanting to hang around and get first picks, whatever happened to come over the table. Or if I'd gotten a lead, then he would know about it. And so he got some good stuff. That's what they phrase is good stuff. And so that, that's and to me it was great. It was like a win-win. I got the money. I helped pay my rent, and he got the stuff that once he got the very best stuff, I never had to worry about it. Because some of the stuff was breathtaking in its importance, in terms of its rarity or the symbolic value of its formatting. It's like how could this ever exist, let alone here is one, or there's only two other guys in the whole country who's got this, and his, we did this continually. And he was totally consistent, totally square in any aspect relating to character or business.
How did you first meet him?
I'm sure he just walked up to my booth and said, do you have any Ferrari catalogs or something? It had to have been that, because I had no reason otherwise to know him. But we got the difference between him and many of his collecting peers was he was a connoisseur. I guess partly from his background, partly from his intellect, partly from his endless drive, but he knew what was really good, he knew what wasn't, and he only wanted what was exquisite or better. And that's what I provided to him. They were like key pieces in the collection. Not that there was that many of his huge collection, but significant indeed. And over the years, God, I can't imagine how many, it had to be in the low thousands of the number of pieces that I sold him, because if he didn't have it, he would take it, but it was like certain categories, such as Ferrari brochures, or things that are just very, very scarce, and yet there's a huge constituency for them, and very important as documents of automotive history.
Well, maybe this is a good time. There's a couple catalogs that he singled out that he got from now. Mm-hmm. And a couple of our curators had some questions, and they were, wondering about what made these, because he counted these as among his treasures. So he got them from you. So I'm wondering if you could shed some light or tell us more about, what made these so significant.
This is like finding somebody that you hadn't seen in 42 years. Let me just take a very quick look at this. Well, first off, I can tell you that he had a great fondness for European, and that's another thing that we had in common, that I actually would, know what the hell this was. And what, is this a document from him, a manuscript?
I think so.
Let's have a look at it. Yes. This is, again, that Provenance stuff. See, he stuck this in as the provenance of this piece. Now, for your curatorial records, I cannot, with 100% certainty, remember where this came from, but I'm going to make a 97 to 98% guess. If you were to, here, let me put, you can put this back. If you were to ask me where was the most fertile place that you ever, for finding stuff, okay, for finding literature, there was a car show in the fall in Huntington, Long Island. And the ratio of people coming up saying, I got this stuff in my attic, or I don't know what to do with it. Again, the literature wanted sign that Fred's got, okay? And so consistently, I would go, and these collections would be the most exotic and unimaginable contents. It's like, and then when you realize that it's New York and you take boats or planes and up, upper income, and Huntington's kind of, I don't know if it's blue blood, but it's up there. And so these boxes of stuff would have, what the hell? And then again, that may be the only one in the continental U.S. Okay, I don't know if it is, but it might be. How do you put a value on it? It's like there's no precedent. Is there a Delaunay Belleville club in the U.S., or do you have to go to France, and do they want it or need it? Or, and so the valuation, this is one of with objects like that, it's where I learned about just how important cash is as a valuation tool, and it ain't. It's like, where does this go? And so it would require learning about Delaunay Belleville or whatever the hell this is, pre-internet days, and deciphering what the pattern of interest was, and from that deriving who should have it, so that I never had to worry about it, And that's why Taylor got so much of the, the significant pieces, because I never had to worry.
And when you say you never had to worry or about setting a value, what do you mean by that?
Whatever I might have charged him for that, it didn't matter. It mattered far less than the fact that it was now safe. I had transferred it from a place that it was unsafe, and the value added was that it was now safe. And here, 40 years later, you show it to me, and I'm proved my point.
So how did you set a value on it? Because I know what you're saying. It seems like it's kind of arbitrary.
The only way to do it was just to take comparable pieces from different makes or year, whatever, and say, okay, well, the range of those is, 60 to $100 or something like that. And then what I would do is I'd step back. After doing all the research, okay, as who's got what or what's comparable, step back and say, what makes sense here? What's crazy in terms of pricing, and what's going to have this guy come back to me?
So,
or give him a good deal so that he has a positive emotion to the piece. So again, it's about this provenance of the thing, and that's and to me, I mean, every once in a while you get something that would be literally on the moon, and it was annoying because you had to pay so much attention to it, and it wasn't about what the cash return was. It was about how do you get this where it should be. So somehow or other, the fates that be have given me this object to, to put to place.
So you really felt in the same. You really believed that these should be safe, and it seems like you had the same sort of reverence for these catalogs. has been said? Or?
Reverence is I'd be careful using that word because that implies that there's some emotional overlay to all decisions related to it. To me, it was good business. Get this someplace where it's safe and where the recipients are happy to have it and happy to do business with me. That'll do far more for me than getting an extra $106 out of somebody.
Got another one to show you too, if you're ready.
Yeah.
This is the other one that he's singing about.
Okay. This is a Hispano piece. This one's going to take me a half a second to review. You don't know what the dates that he acquired these, what year did he acquire these, do you?
I don't.
Okay.
The curators might have an idea.
Yeah. This one I remember, it was one of 500, yeah. Number 319 of 500 of one of the world's most special and expensive cars. And here's the catalog, number 319. This definitely would have come out of Huntington, Long Island, some attic. You know, and Fred didn't get it. You know, when you interview him, ask him if he's got one. Tell Rick told us to Taylor.
So I want to get back to the catalog, but just quick. Was there a competitive aspect to this collecting?
Yes. Yeah, it was. There was some. Let me just quickly.
Yeah, if you want, you can come back to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of smell it. You know, I'm looking at this from a connoisseurship standpoint. This is like, holy bananas. You know, even 30 or 40 years ago when I sold it, it's like, this would be like, you know, he said, what are the top 5 pieces? If you sold 30,000 pieces of literature, what are the top 5? This would definitely be one of them. You know. Anyway, what was the question again?
Or actually, before we get to that, I'll ask you that second one again.
Yeah.
Is it so valuable, or, you know, just because of the rarity? You know, because there's such a limited number?
It's a probability game and a statistics game. Aside from the content, but the content is Hispano Suizes are just among the very most important cars ever made by mankind in the last century. Okay, they're just, you know, you got a couple of the very top brands, this being one of them, this particular period, and it's in basically mint condition. You know, and it's got this load of Provenance with it. But if you got this car, or just, you know, this one, this is only maybe 2.4 million in the current market, you know. So you need this. And you can't have it because this is the only one. You know, there just isn't any availability. There's probably the Hispanic Suiza organization, or whatever it is, they may have it available as, you know, derivatives off these original. But this is the primary data. This is what the factory said. And this is unbelievable. They really weren't expecting to talk to many people about who to buy their car. That's what that says. This is like a short list. We're going to make 500 of these top-tier catalogs. And why? Because we don't need to make any more. They already have their customer base. So for one of these to escape out into the world, it's just a huge piece of stuff. I mention that in terms of rarity and desirability, it doesn't have anything near the format of this. I don't think the Taylor had one of the very first Porsche brochures in his collection. It's called Gamund, G-M-U-N-D brochure. It's a little folder. Doesn't look like anything, but it's just beyond rare. I know I had one, and I had a hell of a time, again, deciphering that whole realm before I figured out before it went out the door. But I don't think he got it. But there are, like in auto literature, like stamps, coins, cars, any collecting realm, there are tiers of rarity and desirability. You know, even though the constituents for auto literature are way smaller than those fields. But the dynamics are the same. And this is just like, you know, like I used to get, oh my God, where, you know, and that's what this is. You know. So, and statistically in the collection, you've got to have, you know, if you pick the top 10 pieces, I can tell you right now, this is one of them. And its cash value doesn't matter. Because if I told you I sold it to him for like $500 or $300, and it was worth $27,650 now, would it matter? No. The cash does not. It fails as an exchange medium because of those other value systems that I mentioned. So you better get out of here before I spill coffee on it.
Before I ask my next question, I just want to let you know again, if you need to take a break at any time.
No, it's fine. Yeah. You know, I thought of a comparable to this that it happened the other day, but it's really a good, I'm trying to think of the word, kind of a parallel, but it's the same exact thinking. I don't know why, but I like typewriters, you know, maybe because they don't cost as much as cars or something. So the other day, my wife comes home with a couple of typewriters that one of our friends had given her and said, put these out on the corner. You know, to pick up, you know, if anybody wants them. So I had to do a little bit of, well, what are they, you know, and so forth. So I found that one of them was the precise duplicate of the one that Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road with, you know, and his sold at Christie's for $22,000. You know, and I got one sitting there and it's in mint condition. So it's like, okay, I know this game. What do I do now? Now I got to pay attention to this thing. You know, it's clearly got great value, emotional value to somebody. It's symbolic value, I don't know, but now I got to place this. And it's the same as, you know, I mean, the Taylor's got that Hispanic piece because, A, he would have the money to buy it and did, but he could be trusted with it.
Well, your typewriter story reminds me of something you said earlier about, you said that the majority of, or especially in your beginning, that the majority of the stuff you came by, you said it never entered the market. And so, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, it would be stuff in people's attics, boxes of, you know, literature that people would go to the New York Auto Show, and or the grandfather or father would go to the New York Auto Show for 20 years in a row, and they just put the stuff in a box and they didn't throw it out. So yeah, it was in terms of the books. If any, it was very rare that I would have anything that anybody else had already discovered. There was enough stuff around that people didn't know what to do with it. There wasn't any like orthodox marketing mechanism for literature, and many of the other key dealers, they didn't have any sense of. I guess they didn't, but there wasn't any curatorial sense the way I had. You know, I mean, I treated it as a museum where you can buy the stuff. You know.
So when did they? So it seems like I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who would just, go to an auto show, you have a catalog, put it in your attic for years. When did it when did something start to be collectible as opposed to, you know, garbage in someone's attic? Or is it just kind of by chance that?
No, it's not. You're actually talking major concepts here, and what I encourage you to do is you go right to your crew of sociologists and cultural anthropologists, and you test out what I'm saying, and test about 5 of them and see how much congruence you get. But with the overriding value in the collecting stuff or saving of old stuff, regardless of what the topic category is the associations. It's the personal associations, and those are almost always generated by family members in nuclear families. It's what you remember. You went to the market in Flint and you bought the Goobies soda or the right kind of sugar, even though you know it was the wrong kind of sugar, because that's what your mom bought or your aunt Susina or whatever. So the personal associations are just the intrinsic design value or fun of using the things. That's a far second to I look at that and I just think of how much fun I had with my dad, Whereas, boy, does this thing feel good to drive, or boy, I can get some really nice chicks to bride in this thing, all these kind of, folkway things. The deal with the typewriter and Jack Kerouac is that you also have this outer ring of personal associations. Pick some, Allen Iverson, okay, the sports guy, and what kind of car? Who are his fans, and what kind of car did Allen drive? There's that. I got a car just like Allen did. Mine's only green instead of blue, But I got the typewriter from Jack Kerouac, and it's, it's the right one, and it came from nowhere, just from heaven, But now I got to figure out what the hell to do with it. And there's no question that I will, but I have no idea where that trail will lead. But it's just the same game that I did with all this automotive stuff.
I'm still really interested, and this will be the last question.
No, that's fine.
But I'm still really interested about the idea of you just sort of coming by these things and then knowing where to put them and who to market them to, and wondering if did you specialize in a niche at all, or did you just work with what you had? How did that process work?
I'm going to try to be brief.
Okay.
The business game, whether it's that business or any other one, is how cheap can you get stuff and how much profit can you make staying ethical and, you don't confuse shrewd with ethics. Stay totally ethical, but be shrewd. And so the best deal of all is when you find stuff on the curb. Zero cost. Okay. And one step up from that, in Philadelphia, is they used to let you keep cars around that had expired inspection stickers. And so Philadelphia was full of, it was consistent. I would find really rare cars and buy them for next to nothing, and then put them, fix them and put them into the national or global market and come up with some pretty good margins. So, and as far as the books go, the literature, it cost something, but it didn't matter. It wasn't, because if what I could do is, if I got a box of 300 brochures, there'd be 10 or 20 or something, or even 5 that really mattered. The rest would be run-of-the-mill, but common. But the value added is finding those, knowing enough to be able to pull those out. A, and B, where do they go?
So, in this process, how important were personal connections?
That's a really interesting question, because I'm sure they were, but I never explicitly contrived them or constructed them, except A, to be totally honest, B, to be reasonable in price, and C, to let people, to do business. Like here, let's provide them the information they need. So I had a really good reputation in the business because it was my intent. The most important thing was I had to live on this planet too. And the second thing was to make sure the guy had the right taillights on his car.
Is there did you have, I know that you're not collecting, so I don't know if this question applies, but is there a particularly memorable or a favorite piece that you came by at any point or that really stands out?
Yeah.
Could you say more about that?
Okay, I was in the business. I was a sole proprietor for 20 years, from 1975 to 1994. I dealt exclusively in literature for about the first 10 years, but I couldn't make enough money to live. So I started buying and selling whole cars and key parts, rust-free parts that I would buy out in the Southwest, again, for literally pennies on the dollar. And it was a license to print money. But in terms of the cars, over those years, I bought, sold, or brokered about 300. Certain number of them I actually owned outright and used as a second car, or put together, restored them to the point where they were saleable and whole and stable, and then sold them. But the stuff I could buy on the streets in Philadelphia, oh my God, look, they only made 28 of those, and there's one, and I can, it's like, again, part of it is the connoisseurship. Let me get that. Let me get it to someone who can keep it, And that was absolutely the key motivator. And every single car, every damn piece of everything I ever bought was, who needs this? Who's going to take care of it? So of the cars, as opposed to my favorite cars, let me just give you a couple of them out of the, and again, I have some pictures here if you want to see them, or lunchtime, whatever. But if you say, well, what's the rarest one you ever found? Okay. I found a 1971 Cuda. It's a Barracuda, but a high-performance one. 440 six-pack convertible. Cost me $195 off the street in Germantown. Sold it to a guy who came from Arizona for it. Paid me $2,000. And the current market value is a little over $1 million. And it was no car that I ever would have bought except I saw it and I smelled something. I said, there's something about that car. But that's the kind of everybody wins deal. Now, the production was 14. And while it may not have been, it's comparable to some of these Hispano-Suiza, models, I'm sure. Another example that one I kept the longest, and this had some personal metaphors to it. One of the first cars I bought was in the mid '70s was a 1947. You ready for the name? Ready for this? 1947 Packard Custom Super Clipper. Now, if you think that's a pretentious name, you should see the car. It was designed by an important designer named Dutch Darren, which Taylor will have, in his files there. But I had it for 17 years. I restored it and drove it, and that's the longest I ever owned any vintage car. The Buick, the 32 Buick, I bought in 1960, sold it in 1964 when I went to college. And in terms of its significance to me personally, that nothing comes close. Again, with the rarity and also Taylor would know a lot. Everybody knows me is sick of hearing about that car, but it was just so, important. And, the fact that it played a key role in saving my life, I played a key role in saving its life. And now, 50 years later, it's in a major car museum in Missouri. So, and they now have its provenance. So, I think those three, there's many others you could say, well, what was the ugliest one you had? What was the, but a lot of them I bought because I also wanted to learn about them. What the hell is, what? Yeah, and so even if it wasn't a sales brochure, it was this manufactured object. Why? What? And I would keep them long enough till I understood that, and then, okay. And also that enabled, the buyers to, inform the buyers as to what they were getting.
I'm wondering, at this point, I guess I'd like to turn and talk about the Cadillacs. I know you obviously have a lot of experience with the actual cars too, but there's a lot of, I mean, with Mr. Vinson's collection, the curators there's no short supply of objects, but there's a lot of information that they don't really know a lot about. And so if you don't, I'd like to ask you some questions, sort of as an expert on these catalogs.
Okay, let me make a comment before you do. Following this meeting, or if they need outside assistance, just call on me. I do know about this game, this field of endeavor. So yes, just call on me. Okay, so what are the questions?
Okay, so one thing that they were wondering is, how are these catalogs published? Do you know anything about that?
Wait a minute. Sure.
Okay.
I'm an expert in this field.
All right.
They're published by independent publishing companies in Detroit. And the advertising, most of the advertising was, the layouts and all that was done in Detroit with probably other sets of subcontractors. But the catalogs are in-house.
And so, would they have been designed with an in-house designers working with an advertising agency, or?
Okay, good question. When I say in-house, I'm thinking of the production of them. Okay, but I'm also thinking about the layout and so forth. I don't know which companies actually produce them in-house. Actually own the printing company. But most used outside advertising agencies to do the graphics and construct the themes. And the variations are where you get the really, really good ones, where, you get equivalent of there are equivalents of this coming out of Detroit, such as Taylor's V16 Cadillac portfolios and so forth, where the concept is generated in-house, and it's all in-house, and then it's put out. Like, for instance, the Packard that I had, 47 Packard Custom Super Clipper. You can imagine them sitting around inside internal trying to figure out what to call these things. This was a radical streamlined looking car. Looked expensive as hell. It was expensive for sure. And the designer was a guy named Howard. Taylor will have this in the collection. Howard Darren, or Dutch Darren. Okay, and he clearly had great sway. He was either influential, or he actually had the power to make the marketing decisions. And you have, it take you about, go Google and put influential auto designers Detroit, and you're going to get 2 seconds. You're going to get a list of, very key designers. Most of the time, the other 98% of the models, it's going to be in-house, anonymous. The guy that figures to put 2 chrome strips down the one side, and a high versus low, all that's anonymous. But when you get a designer whose name is on the thing, this is how, like, Packard actually has a car called the Packard Darren. in 1941. Okay, and he got such prestige out of that they built this whole line of Packard Clippers, and the one I had was the top of the line one. But where you have a personal name on it really matters. It's, in terms also as the marketing. It's like, and that continues on to this to now. I'm thinking about a relatively. Sometimes you get people whose brand becomes the brand, like Lee Iacocca or so forth, or certain Mustang varieties and so forth, where the designer becomes a key imprint. And Taylor went after that kind of stuff big time. He had a tremendous, again, going to RISD and doing all this design kind of stuff, still do it. One of the key things that we had simpatico was that he, even though he wasn't trained in it, he was told to be a lawyer, do words and all this other stuff, he really had a sense of an intuitive understanding of design. And so when I would show him something that was, like the Hispano piece, which was 97% design and 3% nuts and bolts, got it, I don't think he knew, what was motivating him so much. When he gets this 63 Buick versus 64 Buick, the run-of-the-mill stuff, that's fine, but it was really the connoisseurship, and a lot of the connoisseurship was design. And I think if you go and look in his files, well, what you want to do is identify a bunch of key designers all the way back to all, and you should find a disproportionate amount of his stuff that's connected to those designers. Product, I guess you call it product design. Public policy and and even with this stuff, like when you can't figure something out, I figured out how you found out. You ask the 10 smartest people you know in the field, and when you look at how much congruence there is between, because that's the best you could possibly do. Yeah.
And I just want to clarify on one point. So you said that the designers are recognizable, and if they're working on it, but you said that the actual artists and illustrators are anonymous.
Generally not. Okay. Yeah. If there's a marketing advantage, if the governance of the car companies sees a marketing advantage to branding their certain products with certain actual physical people who are designers, they do it. And there's a whole lengthy, and that's something, anytime there was an issue of design was stuck into the equation, Taylor would, come here, he really did. Yeah, and there'll be disproportionate, I don't know how many thousand pieces there are and what a mean or a norm for design-related stuff, but they're still really rare, but they'll still be more than, he'll have more than the average pair. And that, let me bring up one other point, is how many collectors are comparable to Taylor in his, how many people competed for this? Were there to compete for this thing? And it might have been 10, that's a wide range estimate. Fred Simeon, when you talk to him, will know all of them. I know some of them because, we would talk about, well, what do we do with this? We give it to da-da-da-da-da. But Fred is still active in collecting.
That makes me remember a question I had for you earlier, and I want to get back to your expert knowledge on these catalogs. But I wonder if you could tell me about, the competitive nature of this collecting.
It's human hardwiring among people who never had any reason to compete with anybody, and yet they're still boys. And I'm not making a joke. And the best example of that is I can give with, one of Taylor's key motivators, keep it out of Fred's hands. Fred didn't get it. And there was a group of the top collectors who would come to the shows, and everybody knew each other, and they would compete for the very best stuff. And Fred was the champion. One of the things I would, not that this is about Fred, but Fred, in any field, Fred, there's something about his constitution that just makes him have to be, number one. And Fred's collection is even bigger and deeper than Taylor's. Taylor's is probably within the top 5, if not the top 3 in the world, I would guess. Don't quote me on that, but the diligence, the rigor, the money, and the motivation, but there just ain't that many that ever devoted so much of his place here on planet Earth to automotive literature. It's possible. Well, as far as I was thinking about this beforehand, there was a guy, this Fred, who I think is that's it. But there was a guy, I can't remember his name right, a short guy who lived in Springfield, Mass, who had a huge literature collection as well. And he died probably the last 10 years. And then it got all auctioned off, as far as I know. You could ask Fred. I don't know why I can't remember his name. But he was always there in the, ready to grab these. And of course, like in any human endeavor, Taylor gets this. Do you think he keeps quiet about it? No. Oh, how come you get it? I've been, and there was a short list of dealers who would, but so, and like use the word classic, okay? Without time frame, value without a time frame. And putting that on the table in 1976, let's say, and now there's no difference. It's still just as important.
So do you think that, I'll get back to the Cadillacs in a minute, but do you think that a lot of these collectors, how did they see the value of their collections?
Cash. And I don't know what you do with a collection. At this point, I'm out of the market, but B, there were a lot of people who needed a 52 Buick folder or brochure when they were out buying 52 Buicks and restoring them. Now people are buying 86 Pontiacs, and they're not restoring them, just like use it, So the market may be very much diminished. And then in terms of cultural repositories, because of the internet, you really don't need to have a lot of stuff. You don't need to have the hard copies the way you used to. And so does that answer anything?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. And that's actually, I think, changing technology. That's something that I really would like to ask you about too. Actually, at this point, I'd like to go back to answering some of these holes about these catalogs. And I'm wondering, you've talked about the rarity of catalogs, and, there's a limited amount made. And I know in that one, it tells you how many.
Right, yeah.
But is that true for all? And that doesn't seem to be true for all the catalogs. So how do you, determine how rare something is?
Well, you talk to other collectors, and have you ever seen one of these? Or how many times do you have to look at this one? So it's really that kind of consensus. But the home runs are the ones that say how many, and then here's the number. That's the impeccable provenance.
Could you tell me a little bit more about how these catalogs, how they went from the manufacturer to the consumers, to people? I
don't know how we bought a car last year, But the manufacturers make them and they ship them to the to the zones. The zones will distribute them to the dealers, and the dealers will put them on the table. That's you know, it's not a complicated sequence. The issue really is, what about the limited edition ones? You know, that's, you know, how you get those? Isn't you get the stuff that's out on the showroom table? You know, like this never showed up near any showroom table. And there's also like press releases, which are very desirable because they, I don't know if they still have the same format with the glossy photos and more limited edition than the sales brochures.
Were different catalogs produced for different types of consumers?
Different languages. That's usually very, very desirable when you find the 52 Buick catalog in Portuguese as opposed to Spanish. The rarity also the Provenance. So, yeah, the segmentation by user group is unusual, but not, you know, I mean, you don't get Pontiacs for Catholics. That never, you know. But Pontiacs for sports fans or football fans, yeah, you could have something like that. And those are derivatives of like off a magazine ad.
Can you think of any examples? Or?
No, I can't. If I do, I'll let you know, but no. But they'd be very desirable. Usually the formatting is very modest. It wouldn't look like anything, but, or do it for market areas, like for instance, Philadelphia Pontiac dealers, you know, where they would produce their own piece for something that actually they had some reason to promote it. Regional, what would you call those? Is regional variations. Mm-hmm. And they're much, not that they're common, but they're more common than user group variations. Because user groups, you know, pretty much by definition, there's kind of a political aspect, you know.
Did you notice any stylist changes or advertising techniques depending on the manufacturer, or, you know, an expensive car versus an inexpensive car?
Well, it depends on the decade, number one, and number two, it depends who's willing to step outside the norm and well-established and inexpensive production techniques. Sometimes it's appropriate, such as with the binding, like this has got the spiral binding on it. So yeah, there are variations, the type of paper. Taylor was really big on any of those format variations. Again, you'll find a really disproportionate number of these, what they call prestige catalogs. That's the genre. So, I don't know, he was really into format and variations. That's like the sophisticated, you know, it wasn't, I just want a 52 Pontiac brochure. Here's the one that came from the dealers in the New York metropolitan region. It has this, but it doesn't have that. And how does it compare with the one that they made 8 million of for the rest of the USA? That's what you've got here. And you will find, I'm not sure how you'll actually determine it, but there will be many, many pieces in this collection that there are no others, because that's what he went after. You know, rare variations is the term you use. One-of-a-kind variations, really.
I'm a little over halfway through my questions, so it might be good. You want to
take a break? Yeah.
Okay, I guess for now, I'd like to get back to the catalogs and how they were used to sell cars. And that's one area that our curators are really interested in. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that they were free at the showrooms. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you have any insight into how these were used to sell cars.
If I have any insights, how about some explicit statements? If you walked into, we're talking like 50s, 60s, 70s, and 40s, you know. I'm not talking about when showrooms were just a new invention, but when they were established structures and established locations, that the dealers all had names that were widely known. Then you walk in, you know, I'd like to look at a new car, you get a salesman, and at some point through your dialogue with the salesman, he would hand you a brochure. The brochure would almost always have a stamp, rubber stamp, with the dealer's name on the back and the loan, sometimes on the front, but most of the time they're on the back. So the dealers, they weren't customized to the dealers, but the dealers would stamp them, and that was standard industry practice. In terms of how to use the brochure, or use a sales catalog or brochure, well, there's a couple of channels. One, give it to the customer and tell them to take it home and look at it. B, lay it on the desk and point out that the left front wheel of the has got a different white wall than the back wheel, and to verify in print what the salesman is asserting, and that was its key value. And then you take it home, and you look at it and you say, oh, that's what the salesman said. It's got the 392 motor. Or what if I want to? Then you could get back to the salesman if you had any questions. But it's basically a document of a promissory note. This is what you're going to get. I think that's a good way to look at them.
Can you think of any examples of catalogs that by themselves were really successful as a marketing tool or as an advertising tool?
Well, there was this Hispanic squeezer catalog as an icon of marketing. No, absolutely not. No, just no, no, and no. They were diminutive in terms of their hierarchy in the world of marketing, and as a result, most are unexciting, graphically. The value is in the power of association with the car. If the car was a really good car, you got a 57 Studebaker Hawk with a supercharger, and you get the special supercharger brochure. Rarely had it much to do with the formatting of even the information that was in the catalog.
Can you think of any examples? I mean, you're kind of saying that didn't matter as much, but can you think of any examples that were just, flops, that were awful, really bad catalog?
I'll have to think about that. I can't offhand, but I can confirm that if there is such thing, Taylor would have grabbed it in a second, because it's a part of the design continuum. It's nice to have successes in design, but look at this stupid thing. Plus, anything like that would have a very low survival rate. So very desirable. Dumb. Dumb would be very desirable. Or obviously dumb, I guess would be the way to put it.
Some of our curators noticed that a lot of the earlier catalogs seem to put a greater emphasis on the technology or the nuts and bolts, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Do you see a change in over time because they saw those more in the early, less in the later ones? Would you agree with that?
Well, it depends how you define early, excuse me, and later, because early there's this horseless carriage period where just make the thing go along. For it to move forward is a huge accomplishment under control. But if you go on through decades and you come up to the last decade or two, I guess, with a solid state, mechanics don't matter. Who cares? It goes. You see what I mean? It's just like there's changing emphasis, like on communication and safety issues. But whether or not the car will go down the street, that's not a non-issue. So technology evolves over time. So the target in the marketing of technology changes over time as the technology evolves. And that's the nature of technology. And in terms of automotive marketing, a huge angle of approach is that we get the latest technology. How many times have you heard that? Nobody says, I mean, like this morning, for instance, I was driving down here, and there's a Land Rover from the 1960s on the highway, and it's going like 70 miles an hour. And I thought, that thing, here, all these, it can't be, And again, it's a reflection of obsolete technology. And I think the phrase, or using the term obsolete, because that's 180 degrees opposite of what any car maker wants to convey, that what they're putting out in the market is obsolete, even if it may be.
So what kinds of new technologies do you see taking the spotlight as time moved on in the 20th century?
Well, do you want this century or last century?
Let's say last century.
And what's the...
Like, you mentioned safety, as opposed to just getting down the road. And I'm wondering if there's anything, or if you could talk more about that, or other features that you see a big change where they start to be...
Well, let's talk about safety, because this happens to be Taylor's realm. It's what he did for a living, was, shepherd and manage automotive safety initiatives in the government. Or who knows where they came from, I don't really know, but one of the things that would have motivated him, one of the many streams that would have motivated him, is to document all of the history of the transportation and the history of the artifacts that are automobiles, to confirm that they needed it was non-negotiable. The changing technology for safety purposes was not negotiable, that it was essential for the health, safety, and well-being of the United States population. And that's what he did. I mean, I think the first time he told me what he did, I said, what kind of baloney, seatbelts, bad enough, but I think he dug in on the technology. And he was believable. He didn't also threaten people with his aggressiveness, but it was there. It was like very careful. It was like with the Cadillac. It was there, but he wasn't someone who he didn't bludgeon his way. But I think he enabled. It would be very interesting to have a. You don't need a PhD thesis, just a master's thesis to look at his roles in the Department of Transportation, to see how he did business. And did he enable, because of how he did business, did he enable safety, innovation, And with that, then to say, here's a very significant part of his database, which this collection is. He wasn't collecting sewing machine catalogs. That also justifies its existence and defines like integrity. Maybe he just collected all these things because he needed to know what kind of brakes they had, or what the manufacturers said they had.
Is there anything other than safety that you think was a really big change or really important to how the car was marketed or sold?
What car?
Any car, or cars. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Or maybe a general trend.
Well, you're talking now 100 and something years. Who knows how many 100 million cars, how many products, in 170 or something nations? I'm sorry, it's a little bit too broad. Okay, but the unifying element is human hardwiring. Okay, and I will talk about that for a second. In my car business, I sold stuff, literature, parts, whole cars, to buyers in 50 states and 54 nations. Okay, and the guy outside of Melbourne didn't act any different than the guy in Rio de Janeiro or in Southampton, England, when it came to what his perception of what his needs were. And so there are constants. You know, in terms of new cars or modern production, I can't really comment, but I did like, oh my God, they're all the same. And then to pound that home at you, one of the things I do now is, and this is a direct derivative of the Cuba project, is I work with the Philadelphia International Visitors Council, which is the outgrowth of it's a collateral group which is affiliated with the State Department, and there's a network of 92 of them nationwide, and what it is people to people, face to face to with Americans and people from overseas, or different countries. And a lot of them are university and postdoc stuff, and it's like we've had some groups, small groups, you can't even begin to imagine the diversity. It's like, how you can't make it up, you couldn't imagine it. Then you start talking to them, it's like, we're all the same. You know, and so you can try to understand, it's like with a catalog, it's like trying to understand who needs it and so forth. Well, that's what we're doing in, real life and cultural exchanges. And so there are, we can, I can't articulate them for you here, but, Taylor needed to know that. What is a guy in Yugoslavia going to do with a Mercury? Or, somebody in Japan with a Buick. And he needed to know those things. That's why he collected all this foreign literature.
How, I know that Mr. Vinson, there's instances where he wrote away embassies into foreign manufacturers, and so he really had a lot of international communication.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I'm wondering, did you have the same experience, or how was your experience, similar or different?
Well, there were some personal experiences, and then in terms of the foreign stuff, there was actually some, I got most of my literature domestically. But he and I both had a very keen awareness and interest in overseas. And mine, I'll show you the pictures in a minute. My first job planning job out of school was, I got lucky. I got a job at the Greater London Council, Civic Design Section. Have you ever been to London? Anyway, it was across the street from Big Ben and the river and all that. And they gave me the job of going out and looking at the English countryside and saying what I thought, as an American, that other people from overseas might like to see. And so I did this. I was there for almost a year, and I did this whole Europe trip and all that. But it's like, you're in the center of the damn earth, center of mankind. Just ask any English person, they'll tell you. And so I really did have this firsthand, it's primary data about the rest of the world. And that was still to this day, it's a key influence. That's how what generated the Cuba stuff. And Taylor, this may be outside your bounds, I don't know. But Taylor was instrumental in setting up that taillight diplomacy initiative. Couldn't have done it without him. Because he had that inside the government experience. He had the awareness and interest in other people, other cultures, and American cars. And, he was smart, educated, formally educated, so that he could indeed understand the protocols of putting together a policy group. And then he represented it to the Society of Automotive Historians as a president. He was one of 7 people on the group, And that was because of so many discussions that we had about, so what do you do with a 37-year-old Vauxhall that's going across Waterloo Bridge in London, Or my 1948 Jaguar 1.5-liter saloon. What do you do with that? This kind of. When I got there, I bought this as soon as I could. I bought a vintage car. Everybody else thought it was ridiculous, but it was special to me. But again, it was the cultural norm. Mm-hmm. and understanding cultural norms about the cars. Well, again, when you go through and you find some catalog from Peru or who knows what, he was so interested in that stuff, and understanding global perception of automobiles. And if you were to ask me how important was that as a motive in his collecting, top 5, no question. The cultural anthropology, global. He was so interested. It's like, amazing.
Do you think that's a common characteristic with these top collectors?
Absolutely not. Fred, yes, but no. Most of it's very, this is America, and this is the only place that matters, and you get that kind of. If it didn't come from Detroit or Milwaukee, I don't want to know about it. The collectors are very, like, that's it. I'm not being rude or incorrect. That's, the interests are very narrow focused. Taylor's was literally the universe.
How much? I don't know if you can answer this or whatever, but I'm just wondering, how much of his collecting was about the literature, and how much of it was about travel and personal connections, and were those?
The literature is all symbolic for the other. It was. The literature was just documented what he wanted to know or what he needed to know. It wasn't that I need to have this precious piece of paper, but that Hispano-Suiza catalog says it's a documentation of just how intense interest in cars was and interest in aesthetics and marketing skills were in France in 1936. It's all, he was a lawyer, and what it all is evidence. That's the key word. He was collecting evidence.
Evidence for what?
Of what cultures were like and interest in cars were like, and if, for instance, if he got here's an example of, like, with the internet, which he didn't really have, but I kind of try to keep track of who's saying what about me and so forth, and so there was something. The Chrysler dealers in the capital of some Eastern European country, I can't remember which one it was, and they had picked up something that was from somewhere else, and there it was, Rick Shnitzler, Ljubljana, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's like, and that's what he was doing, hard copy. But that's what I hadn't thought about this now. This whole collection is nothing but evidence. That's the conceptual framework for it. I never understood what the lawyer had to do with it all, but you think about all the different value systems that exist in that, Hispano-Suiza catalog.
I know throughout these questions you've already told me a lot about your friend, Mr. Vinson, but I'm wondering if you could tell me what kind of a person he was, or if there's a story maybe that you think of that really, encapsulates.
2 words come to my mind: square and generous. He was a nice guy. He was a very good guy, and he was not overbearing in any way, shape, or form. I think about staying at his house in Washington, first at 6th Street, and then the one in, I guess it was Alexandria. And he was couldn't have been, just made you feel totally comfortable, knew how to do it, and did it. So as in terms of his character, and he gets all A's in my book. And you ought to get A's in your book, giving you all this stuff.
Do Do you have any really particularly vivid memory that comes to mind about him? Or?
Offhand, I can't think of any, but I will. If I do, I can just email it to you.
Okay.
You know, there's no. You know, over all those years, what I've really given you is the organizing principles of our relationship, and I'm trying to also think if did you ever get annoyed or angry. What did I ever do that might have been? And the only possible thing is sell something to somebody else. He really was mild-mannered, good, even-tempered. Very hard not to like him.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm wondering if you could tell us about, I wonder if you could tell me about model cars.
True.
Well,
he had a collection, didn't he?
Very big.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I wonder if you could tell me, our curators are kind of stumped about what to think about these model cars. What are they?
I have to see them. That's my first comment.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, they're 3D evidence as opposed to 2D evidence.
How were they, who made them? I mean, in general, like...
Okay, it was as opposed to the sales brochures, model cars was big industry. They had value as mostly toys, but also as promotional devices. But it took, a lot of tool and die skills and infrastructure to make them and then to distribute them. So, and many are very highly collectible. You hold them in your hand as opposed to the sales brochure. It's a radically different market, radically different set of demands. And a good deal of that relates to rarity, because you can make a whole lot more paper folders than you can. And then it's the actual appeal. You can actually hold the thing in your hand and so forth. And condition variations, rarity, but different game altogether. I had a collection myself, my own personal collection of dinky toys, which were the UK die-cast ones. But what they call, I think they call them promotional models here, half-inch scale. It's a huge and broad field. And you want to be very careful because your curators want to be very careful not to identify them, that's easy, but to determine which ones are really rare versus common. And Taylor would have known that, just like, again, this Hispano book. But if they need a broad brush, I can give them that, no problem.
How were they distributed compared to, were they also in the showrooms?
Most of them were sold retail as toys or mail order. They usually weren't connected to the showrooms as a selling device or any other thing. They were just independent. There were a couple of companies, really big companies that made them. And then there was the technology of plastics versus die-cast, and that changed a lot over time. And then there's cast iron. The early ones are cast iron. It's a big, big deal, that toy thing.
And so then the manufacturer, do you know about the relationship between sort of how they would be made from the manufacturer?
The manufacturer would authorize them.
Okay.
And use of the trademark.
Okay.
The car manufacturers did not make the toys. But as opposed to the catalogs, which could be, produced by small printing companies or in-house, these required major industrial facilities, the toy realm, to make them. Saying it's toy technology. But it's complicated. But there also are experts in that field. But again, I'd be happy to look at them for them.
Okay. One of our curators showed me but she's, there's a great variety of the different ways that people try to, or these manufacturers and advertising agencies are trying to sell cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, aside from regular forms of advertising and the catalogs, are there any other is there anything else that stands out as ways that they would market and sell cars?
What do you mean, current trends?
I'm sorry? Current
trends? Or old, obsolete?
Any.
Well, there's a current trend which is a really big deal, okay? And you recall what we've talked about, Flint and generational, and then you recall my comment about the 32 Buick and how, my father and all that, generational links. You'll notice ever-increasing frequency of use of multi-generations interacting inside the car or with the car as a selling device. And lots of them just watch. You see little kids with their dad or their mom, and they're in the car, or they're going to get in the car or something. And that's that generational connection. It finally seems to be realized. My comment before, okay, and this one's on the record about the Society of Automotive Historians, there are huge opportunities for their members either directly or partnering with people who are not in their organization to articulate and recognize and articulate these major trends in automotive culture. And they don't. You just turn on a TV and you say, oh my God, look, there's a 4-year-old and he's doing this and there's the car, So somehow that seems to be happening, it's being adapted more and more. Generational sharing is what I would call it.
This is a little bit off topic from that, but for this exhibit, they're gonna actually recreate the feel of a showroom in the center of it, and they've purchased a car that they're actually gonna put in the exhibit in the center, and it's a 1958 Nash Metropolitan. And I'm wondering if you have any reactions to that car, if there's anything what do you think about that car?
Well, in terms of general or in terms of the specifics of use of it in a showroom?
I guess in general, yeah.
In general, it's a very important car in that mechanically it's a dumb box, okay? But it was made in UK and badged with USA and sold worldwide. And it's cute. So that it has really, it's got pretty colors and nice color separations, and it's a delightful toy of a car. So as long as they do the irony part of it, has so little to do with the cars that were the main thrust of automobile culture then. And I will give you a lead on that. There's a group called the Microcar Society in Massachusetts, and they're the major umbrella group for tiny cars like that. Okay, and if you'd like, I can introduce you to them. It's no problem. We've done a bunch of business with them. Microcar and Minicar Society is what it's called, and that's the car category that fits. But it's in terms of curatorial distinction or use, it's a caricature. It's like, what's all right? Pretty yellows and turquoises and red and stuff. It's cute. Have you seen it? Oh, isn't that cute? But is it appropriate? That's another thing. Would Taylor go for it? Yes, he absolutely would.
Why is that?
Because there's an element of delight and irony in it. He would know immediately to reject it on any mechanical, accomplishments. But in terms of a multinational marketing device and hardwiring and delight, nobody who sees a Metropolitan can do anything but smile. They may not do that when they ride in it, but, you know. And they sold a lot of them. All, you know, it's not just here. It really is a global brand. And Nash was pretty much a dead brand at that point. I think 57 was the last time they actually had a USA car called a Nash. Go to your brochure collection, you can determine that.
Okay, I've just got a few more questions for you.
I'm getting ready for my lunch.
Okay.
I won't get crabby, I promise. My
okay,
wife says, don't get crabby on them now.
One thing I'm interested in is something you mentioned earlier, and you brought up the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, as a dealer, how changes in communication have made a difference in your practice.
Well, going back pre-internet days, and there's a major publication in the old car field called Hemmings Motor News, which I'm sure you have or know about. And one of the things that differentiated my business from others is I used the media. I put display ads in, and full-page display ads. I do, strategically positioning classifieds and with other, venues and so forth. And it was hard copy and worked really well. That's how we got most of our business, and also how we confirmed to the rest of the world that we were legit. Because people say, oh, well, what's Rick putting in there this time, And of course, Taylor had everything he ever wanted before anybody else got it. That's why that piece like that never made it. In terms of internet, it's like the way I like to put it. Again, you can see from my Google record that I really do pay attention to it and exploit the opportunities that it presents. But in terms of its use and where it is, there was Gutenberg did this gig with the Bible in 14-something, and then somebody invented electricity, right? 1918-something, and now we've got the internet, and its potential is that profound. The other day I was, and I'm not really literate with a lot of it, but the other day, one of these Fulbright scholars that I do business with, he was in, or interact with, he's in Tanzania. And so you press the button and it's Tanzania, and he presses his button and it's USA. No time, no cost, no distance. Okay? And I can show you a picture of how we used to do it pre-internet, I sold cars to people all over the world without the internet. So there's just no imagination. There's no imagining its potency. That's how I see it.
Do you think in that transition anything has been lost?
No.
No?
It's just all positive. Yeah, it's just astonishing. It's just like, like you're asking in 1907 if you asked somebody who had got electricity, is there anything lost with the kerosene lamps? No.
I just have one more question for you. It's kind of broad, but I'm just interested to know, it seems like you've spent a great amount of time and years of your life dedicated towards, both your work with working on cars and then also dealing catalogs. And
right.
just reflecting back, what's been the most valuable thing from that experience?
Understanding of the world firsthand. It's absolutely it. I'm so pleased. If you were making judgments on my life, or, well, okay, Rick, what have you done, Well, I sold stuff to people in 50 states and 54 nations, which really means I got people to trust me in those places. And that's, you know, and I was able to enhance their position, you know, and that's where the value is. The internet enables that much. You know, you do Skype, I could talk to the guy in Tanzania, you know. But it's really this human need for connections and trust. I'm not asking a guy why, if he's in Melbourne, why he wants a 40-year-old Cadillac. It's not my role. But if he wants one, and I can deliver it, and he trusts me, and I get the good money for it, and you know, everybody wins. So I got absolutely can't even begin to imagine the positive impacts on the internet.
I don't have any more questions. Is there anything you want to add while the cameras rolling?
Do I get one of those quarters that's on the table?
You can have them all.
The only, I'm sure there's more, but I would like for you all to understand Taylor's role in establishing this Cuba stuff, because it's a symbol of how he, you know, we've talked about his global outreach and all that. All it was an opportunity to actually do that. And also, just because, you know, DuPont had some connections in Cuba, so there was some apparent situation. And when I went to Cuba the first 2 times, I became aware of this DuPont mansion that was in Veradero, because we were staying in Veradero. And so it's like, even though that goes back to, you know, decades and decades, you know, it's part of a bigger picture. You know, it's putting little, some people call it loose ends, but I call it just taking the facts and ordering them, you know. And so there's the brand, it's like the branding of Hagley, you know. And hey, I got some stuff about Cuba. You got a guy here who's, I mean, when I show you some of this media stuff and you realize that he was like, you say, oh, we hadn't, you know. Maybe if we could get some Cuban license plate and put it on the Metropolitan.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
But, you know, so I'm saying, just in terms of your curatorial stuff, well, it's off my desk once I'm assured that you're aware of this realm that he participated in. It's your business what you do with it.
Well, if there's nothing else, I guess that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. When do you want to look at these, or you want to show with the curators, or whatever?
If you want to, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm here all afternoon. If you said you were hungry, we could go get lunch.